Welcome to the latest edition of the OmniTalk Spotlight Series, where we discuss the technologies, the companies, and the people that we believe are shaping the evolution of retail. Today, we are turning our spotlight up even brighter on what we think is one of the biggest trends in retail right now, and that is the use of robotics and AI in retail fulfillment. Today, we are joined by Bill Stenger, the Director of Food Solutions for Knapp. Bill, welcome to the show.
Really glad to be here. I know we've been trying now for months and months to come together, so glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah, this is awesome. I think we've probably known each other or been in contact with each other probably going on almost like a year and a half, 2 years now. And the reason for that is you guys are the key partner in what Takeoff Technology is doing around microfulfillment.
That is indeed correct. It has been quite a journey with those guys, and it's been a fun road. I mean, it's been for me 4 years with them, and we have become the exclusive partner with Takeoff for the automation and robotics for their microfulfillment.
And Ann and I have seen the facility now, I think twice in Florida, once with you. We've attended your conference as well, Knapp's conference, down in Florida as well last year. Tell us a little bit. What is Knapp? Let's start there. Let's go 30,000 foot view. Who is Knapp as a company? What do they specialize in? Why are they such an important part of this overall conversation for retail?
I think for us, the best way to describe what we do, the last 50 years, since it's 1950s approximately, so 70 years almost, we've been doing what we do, and that was primarily focused in wholesale pharmaceutical distribution. That led to a need for filling patient orders rapidly from and close to city centers. The problem in Europe, as we're all aware, is land is quite expensive, so it led to the development of our OSR shuttle product, which is a order storage and retrieval robot, effectively, that went to market about 18 years ago.
Okay.
So the evolution was we needed to have a product to serve patients rapidly with their scripts. Additionally, the software behind that, and then from there, the business evolved into what it is today, which is the global leader in goods-to-person technology and software that services healthcare, retail, food, industry, and so forth.
And you mentioned a word there, too, that I think is important that I want to double-click into, shuttle. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of different listeners on our program from all walks of life in retail and from other industries, too. What is a shuttle? If you can actually unwrap that, unpackage that for people, when people say that word in the context of robotics, What does that really mean?
So in the past, I think the original methodology was they called it mini load, which is a crane that goes up and down an aisle. So almost 20 years ago, the team said that there's challenges with that technology as it relates to if you have a failure of a mechanical component, you lose that entire inventory, right? So the idea was build these small robotic shuttles on every single level to retrieve totes.
Okay.
And in the event of a failure of a particular shuttle robot, you don't lose access order fulfillment for that entire aisle, whereas that was the main driver for, say, the development of the technology. And over the course of time, it also lends to the maximizing of throughput of the system, and it allows to the lift mechanism be, let's say, utilized more effectively.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen that in operation at Sedano's, right? Where essentially it's these layers of robotics that are running through and picking the product and trying to maximize that throughput on those levels.
Yeah, it's funny. That's in that on that scale. Those are about 30 of those shuttles running just in that Sedano site. But the reality is, there's probably almost going on 40,000 of these little guys running around the world right now. So in the scale of things, they're quite small, but it's a very important part of what we do.
But a very important part of what you do. Right. Well, let's talk about that, because what you guys do is incredibly important. At least I think so, and I've been on record as saying I think the concept of micro-fulfillment in grocery is probably going to only expand. Mm-hmm. I even feel now like I've been conservative in my predictions. I've said 3 to 4-fold this year. My hunch is it might even be bigger than that in terms of the number of implementations that are going to happen. But from your perspective, what is happening in the grocery industry? What have we seen over the past few years? What do you think is going to happen next?
So I think the landscape is evolving quite rapidly. You have a different generation of shopper beginning to enter the space that is doing a more frequent grocery shopping. We are increasingly more busy in our lives as you see more and more, let's say, dual income families, in my opinion, that are also having families, and you want to try. And I'm sure you can probably attest to this. It's you want to do the things that you enjoy to do and not focus on things like grocery shopping as it exists today, right?
We want a podcast at 7:30 in the morning when we're together in Minneapolis, of course. What can we do to make that happen?
Exactly. So, there's nothing more powerful than saving time and money and be able to focus on those things, in my opinion. And I think that as grocery exists today, it's not a destination experience. A lot of what you do at like Third House here, I feel like you're focusing on the experience. You talk about like Lululemon, for instance, I remember recently, and I think that's kind of where I see the future of the space going, and making grocery shopping a destination for a coffee shop, maybe a bar or a wine, and while robots are picking, the center store for you, and you can even have the time to go pick your perishables and specialty meats. So I think there's going to be an evolution occurring in the space. Question is when will it officially happen?
Right, and to what degree, right? And I think, what are the impact on the economics of the business model for grocers as they try to grapple with that question? Like, how do you guys think about what Knapp can do and the solutions you guys can provide? How do you think about it in that context in terms of the business model evolution of grocery and what robotics allow or afford retailers the opportunity to do if it's thought about in the right way?
It's funny. We have been in the e-commerce grocery business for quite some time. I mean, it's in Spain, France, and in Korea now, and when these are very established markets for e-grocery, and centralized fulfillment has been a very key part to maximize maximize the productivity, and then we never really solved for the last mile, right? And then this crazy idea of my friends from Takeoff about after spending a few years with Mick Mounts and at HBS trying to solve for the last mile, right? The next evolution of grocery, and now what we find is this hybrid methodology of there makes sense for centralized, it makes sense for a smaller centralized, and it makes sense for hyperlocal microfulfillment. But I can tell you, it was a journey to get people to buy into it from our organization and other companies I know, because you're taking away what we do, right? We do big, complex, expensive warehouse automation, and now we're saying, let's go build a bunch of small ones and hope that these guys are right.
Right. Break that out for the audience, too, because I think what you said there is incredibly important. And you'll read the stories in the media about, like, okay, there's this new implementation here, there's this new implementation there. But there are definitely different schools of thought about how the evolution of grocery can transpire, whether it's hyperlocal, whether it's centralized. Break it down for us. What are the options, and what are the different kinds of puts and takes with those as people are trying to look at them?
So what I think is happening right now is you're seeing retailers responding to the Amazon Whole Foods coming together for fear purposes. However, that I don't think retailers really know what the adoption rate will look like in the U.S. for e-grocery. I think I'd say conservatively, you could say it's 3.5%. Some will say it's closer to 5%.
Right.
I'm leaning probably closer to like 4 to 4.5% adoption, which is still very much trailing behind what we're seeing in Europe and Asia, right?
Still small, yeah. It's definitely not commonplace, I think, in everyone's
life.
So
I think it's really hard for retailers to say, I'm going to completely revamp my supply chain and focus on one technology or one type of solution.
One specific way.
Correct. And so I think that up to this point, the manual, either the retailer or the third party picking in store and home delivery has been the most easy, rapid way to get to market and allow for retailers to compete in the space. I think in the long term, it's going to be challenging because the retailers, if you're using a third party, are giving up the customer experience and the data, right? And I think it's an extremely important piece of the equation. And that's why I think you're seeing like Walmarts and the Krogers and Targets are trying to take on and own more of that last mile with their own people. And obviously, it's an incredible, important piece of the puzzle with Instacart. I think it's amazing what they've done over the last few years. But
and why the experience? You mentioned the experience. Like, why do they the data part? I think we've talked about a few times, but too, I think the other part that gets lost is what you said, the customer experience. Like, why is that still something so important to think about, even with those services? Like, what are the implications of customer service if that model is to take hold versus, say, other options that you talk about?
The UI. You're not going through a Kroger or Walmart's page. You're going through like the Instacart page, and I think they immediately own you from that moment, right?
Right.
And they are tracking your experience. So, I think Kroger.
It's off platform. It's through them.
Yeah. I live in Atlanta. Kroger's a big staple, as well as Publix, and Kroger has done a great job from their Kroger pickup standpoint, but it's not always convenient for us from a not having the delivery aspect down. So Instacart, in our family's case, having a little kid makes a lot of sense, right? And then as let's say the microfulfillment conversation is kind of picking up, gaining steam, I think that it's gonna further evolve. But back to your earlier question, I think what's driving what's happening, and I think you will see a clear multi-tier approach, depending upon how established the e-grocery business is in that particular market. The geography, obviously the demographic, and I believe what will happen is automating on a store level will start to make a lot of sense once the financials are absolutely proven out. I think that's well on its way in the next 12 months. I think there's going to be a major headway. It's no secret that Takeoff has been quite successful in building some very strategic partnerships with, Sedano's initially, Ahold Delhaize, Wakefern, Albertsons, Loblaws. You saw Woolworths. You saw the recent announcement this week on Carrefour.
Yes.
Which is a big deal.
That's a big deal. Yep.
I mean, so they're seeing movement. People are seeing the value, and I think that the financials are starting to show what Takeoff has been promising. And even if the financials aren't even as good as what they originally thought, it's still better than losing money and making more money than a traditional grocery transaction.
Right, through the other options. And I think for those two, just to put a pin on exactly kind of what the concept of microfulfillment is, essentially, the way I think of it is it's, hey, let's co-locate a warehouse-style automated facility on site or as close as possible to a retailer in general, in principle. The idea is that with e-grocery coming, like you say, you don't need as much space in the store. Devote some of that space to capabilities and processes that are tried and true in terms of how picking and packing can get done. And then, oh, by the way, you're closer to the customer from a last-mile delivery perspective. And so certain markets, like you've said, like you've used examples in Europe, certain markets lend themselves to that style of thing. What are some of those characteristics of the markets here in the U.S. From a retail standpoint that are ideal for that type of thought process for retailers to start deploying?
I think the hub and spoke methodology, which is what we believe in. You don't need to build a automated store in every single store that you can support. Typically, a traditional MFC is able to process about 30 million a year in actual orders, right?
Right.
And that typically, I'd say on average, can probably sustain about 4 to 5 stores per MFC or hyperlocal fulfillment model. But again, as the business grows, there's a financial piece that may make more sense to do maybe I'm calling it like an urban CFC, which would be like let's say that the MFC does 500 orders. An urban MFC, or urban CFC, is going to do say 5,000 orders, and then you have the CFC. On the CFC, I'm a firm believer that there's a lot of available existing distribution network for retailers today that's been really well thought out,
right?
And about the placement of those facilities, and with some of the advancements that we're seeing in the technology space could lend to now this omni-flexible central fulfillment that allows you to do store replenishment and e-commerce fulfillment out of a centralized warehouse, getting the maximum productivity. Yes, there's a last mile challenge there, but again, it really comes down to what the business is demanding, right, from my perspective. But I clearly see that these are the three methodologies that will kind of build the future supply chain for grocery globally.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's a complementary tool. And then even that point about the last mile thing's really interesting too, because there's still a whole host of ways to attack that part of the question, which is separate from still how do you do the picking and packing and where is it most efficient to do that. Whether it's last mile delivery or some type of locker solution or some type of hybrid solution off of all those concepts, there's still so much ground to be understood within that game that it's going to be interesting to see. And this type of solution just enables you to do that type of experimentation. But let's turn more to that then. Let's talk specifically. You mentioned a little bit in terms of, I think you said you've known the Takeoff guys for now 4 years. Tell us as much as you can about that. Like, how did that all come about? What is the secret sauce in your mind in terms of what Knapp's doing, how you guys are working together, and how you guys plan to basically attack the market here in 2020?
Yeah, so back 4 years ago, Jose Vincentane and his founders of Takeoff Technologies went to market. It wasn't just a pure, hey, Knapp, what can you do for me? Like, we actually had to earn the spot. It got down to a couple different companies, and when what it shook down to, one was relationship. I mean, I think there was immediately, we're still a privately held company. We're one of the last few remaining in the space, family owned largely. Okay. And so we had this bond, so to speak, with this family type of company. I mean, the gentlemen come from Venezuela. They all know each other. It's about family. It's about the bond, right?
Well, and you were telling me before, like this started as like hallway conversations while these like Jose was in business school with
I think so. Max Pedro and I think I believe Mick Mounts was in their HBS class as well. I can't 100% confirm that.
And who's he again?
He was the founder of Kiva that sold to Amazon for I think it was like $780 million for the Kiva.
Yeah, he did go. That was pretty good. Yeah, and so they were just hanging out. Like,
so they're like, okay, look, we know that like the last evolution in grocery occurred like with Piggly Wiggly 100 years ago.
They love talking about that.
When you make the consumer do the shopping in their home delivery.
Yeah,
it was a great idea. Right. Ahead of its time, right?
They're warehouse pickers basically. Yep.
But they knew like with this digitalization of how consumers are shopping that something had to change.
Right.
And so this journey began well before even Amazon entered the space with the Whole Food acquisition, and so they're evaluating these technologies. There's in my opinion there's about 4 or 5 different types of focal points from fulfillment. You have mobile robotics like AGV, AMRs.
Okay.
Mini load, the cranes that we saw in the past. I was mentioning earlier about the cranes and some of the limitations that we saw when we were developing the shuttle. The hives, which you're seeing some people now that are jumping on with some other technologies that are in the space today. These quote unquote hive technologies, right? Very very interesting concepts.
How do those work?
So there's 2 different trains of thought. One is the hive. There's these bots are running on top of racking or inside the racking. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've seen the Kroger Ocado
videos.
So it's similar to that. There's a couple other companies as well that are startup that are trying to enter the space. I think that in the automation world, if you're not part of this conversation, then you're going to have a challenge because I think this again is a big part of the future supply chain and even beyond grocery. Yeah. But anyway, I think. They evaluated the pros and cons, and what it came down to was the ability to go to market rapidly, the reputation, the working relationship between the 2 companies, and they were very good salespeople, and they were able to, let's say, get exclusive rights to the technology for North America.
Oh, okay.
So we have now been exclusive with them for just almost 2 years now officially, and the relationship's been wonderful, mutually beneficial. They're all over the news. They're really making major inroads with all the retailers on a global scale, and you have the Knapp brand that is well known in the space. So really a great balance. But one of the things I say that they are truly remarkable is what they've built. Right, you have a bunch of retailers that come from the space. You got Walmart executive, you got a grocer from South America, you've got investors that are in the food space, you've got education from Harvard, from MIT. Yeah. I mean, they have one of the most impressive benches of a team I've seen in a very, very long time. And they're focused on being an end-to-end software company. And I think that's something that is special about them and a differentiator and something that's underestimated by the retailers. I think that, Knapp could go and we could build something, but I'm going to need thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of development and build a software package specific. But I don't know retail like these guys know retail on a local level.
Right.
So you let Takeoff do what they do really well, which is the end-to-end software that interfaces with the retailer and our technology. You let the retailer do what they do, and that's the customer experience. And you let Knapp do it, and that is robotics, automation, and technology advancement to further maximize the productivity of these automated facilities. So as people try to embark on this journey, they must not underestimate the importance of the software piece of the equation, and that's what makes them special.
I love that you said that because I think there's 2 important things here, right? I think for people that are listening, if you're thinking about evaluating this type of solution, there's one, what is the tried and true technology for the use that you want to use for the use case for which you're going to deploy that technology? And I want to talk about that more. But the second part, which is really important, is you also have to fit it into the right context, and that's where the software development and working with people that get retail, that understand retail, are honing it over time for all the different use cases that people are probably going to encounter. Those 2 pieces have to be thought of together. Correct. Otherwise, you're trying to bolt something in, and that's not going to work. So right. I do want to hit back on that, though. So then from the standpoint of Knapp and what your technology does within that construct, why were you guys the right partner for Takeoff and what they're trying to do? What is the special sauce that you bring to the equation as you're trying to figure out how do we fit hyperlocal fulfillment centers into 5,000 to 10,000 square feet of retail space throughout the U.S. or even the world?
It was really funny. I can't tell you how many trips we took to Europe and Asia together. Right. And, you're sitting here, they're trying to sell a vision, right, to these retailers.
I can't even imagine.
And it's like, hey, I want you to go and spend this money on this idea that we have. We think it's going to work, and here's why. And the best way to do it was, let's take you to existing e-commerce grocery fulfillment and let you see it firsthand. And just here's the technology, here's the core tech. Now just scale it down.
Yeah, right. Shrink it. Yeah. No, totally.
So like Jose and I, we traveled to Spain, to France, to Korea together with different retailers trying to sell this vision.
It's like take this sailboat and put it into a glass bottle, right? Like that. I mean, it's impressive.
But I think that was a huge part, and I think that was something that Knapp was willing to, let's say, share that experience with them and help them share create the vision, and let retailer executives put their hands on the technology, and that was a huge piece that really forged our relationship forward, in my opinion.
And from a scale perspective, because there's a lot of startups out there in this space, and there's a lot of even companies that are new but still on the startup side of things. But you guys, like you said, you've been around for a long time. How do you think about that as an advantage for you in terms of just the amount of R&D that you guys spend, how much resources you put towards product development, and trying to work out the kinks, both in terms of how the product evolves, but then also I think another key part of this is, how do you service the product every single day as it's out in market?
Yeah. So, when we've talked offline, that our investments into research and development are quite substantial. We're over $1 billion company, and about 7% of our spend each year is in R&D and product development, not project development, right?
Right.
And so it allows us to focus on advancements. And we've pursued so many different types of concepts and ideas from technology perspective, and we've bought companies that we thought kind of were at the forefront. We're very good at buying companies that complement our current portfolio. Don't transform our company. It's bits and bytes, so to speak. And, we've spent, like I said, even though the OSR shuttle, for instance, has been running for 18 years, we're in probably the 4th iteration. And the latest one now was the OSR Evo, which now allows us to be even more flexible and scalable. And that helps with micro-fulfillment, but it's even more valuable for the centralized fulfillment methodology, as you have this business that can either expand and contract from a digital or from a replenishment perspective. So, you have investments in software interface. You have investments in the AMR, the mobile robotics, and that's not something that would be possible for Takeoff to do on their own and with their own in-house technology, right? And that's something that Jose has been very adamant about. Yeah, I could go and try and build my own stuff, but it would be very expensive and very timely. Why would I not capitalize on my partnership with Knapp? We're live now with the first 5 sites are up and running.
Right.
The next 2 are coming in the next month. Right. With the next 20 are coming the next year.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So
okay, my prediction wasn't too crazy. Then.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
But it's exponential. It's a little bit crazy. And we're at a point now we're at a build to stock strategy.
Right.
I have a warehouse in Atlanta where I'm housing micro fulfillment centers just because things happen. And that's another a key point. It's like the retailers don't underestimate what it takes to build a automated warehouse in the back of a retail store.
Right.
There's a lot of moving parts, but
that's a key point too, right? Like you can actually move on this pretty quickly, right? It doesn't take long to build one of these things either.
No. So to build it, we got down to I think we originally were 20 weeks when we first were started. I mean, obviously there's a production and manufacturing ahead of time. I think we're down to 13 weeks now, and I think that's really pretty good because just we could build it, I'm sure, a little bit faster, but there's really no benefit to go faster. I don't think the retailer and the general contractors could keep up with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And as you're trying to source these locations, just things happen, building permits and things like that. So I think we're in a pretty good sweet spot right now. And then Takeoff, they have their commissioning and ramp up, which is increasing, I'd say, rapidly as well, the duration of time.
Yeah.
So, but.
Yeah, I think that's that for me. I get asked because I've covered this concept a lot in writing, talked about Takeoff a lot, and I think what you just said there is really what I want people to know is what I have found so interesting about this is that it is a marriage between both these companies, Knapp and Takeoff, And what I really love, and the reason I'm so interested in, is the philosophy. Like, I think we talk a lot about MVP, or knowing exactly what the use case is that you're designing for. And you can really see that in terms of how I think both companies are working together to attack the market. Here's what we do on Knapp's side. Here's what Takeoff does on their side. Let's go after this, find the use cases, and let's deploy. And in the background of that context, which is why I wanted to bring you on the show today, is there's a lot of research and development money that goes towards understanding exactly what all the ins and outs of that are. And to your point, which I thought was really well said, is that, like, it's hard for a startup to do that. Like, that's a lot of money and a lot of investment when you're trying to find the product market fit for what you're trying to do at the same time. So I think kudos. It's going to be really interesting to watch. What else is on the horizon, though? I want to talk about kind of everything here. What else do you guys have planned as a company for 2020 that you're excited about?
Oh, wow. What I can and can't share. There's a lot.
Give us it all, Bill. Give us it all.
I think I'd be making a career move if I did that. I mean, effectively, what I think it comes down to is the vision technology. Everyone talks about vision.
Ooh, okay.
I know you guys are touching on that on the
for
on
sure.
the store,
We follow that
inside
closely.
the store and the Amazon Go stores. Yeah, you may have saw the articles that were circulating yesterday about the partnership with Covariant AI out of UC Berkeley and Knapp. It's been a hush-hush. The partnership and what we've been able to accomplish, the two of us, for like robotic picking, has been something really spectacular.
Oh, okay.
Not going into too much detail, but we've effectively been able to pick a much larger assortment of articles depending upon packaging type. That there was a lot of limitations in the past, and it had to do with the vision piece of the equation. We were able to pick 20-30% of the SKU profile. Now we're in some cases upwards of 90-95%.
Wow.
We're testing it now also in the grocery sector too, and with very very favorable results. I think what we're seeing happening though, that it's the most intriguing to retailers, is because of the way that the neural network is set up for these robots, the need for master data goes away.
Okay.
What that means basically is I don't need to keep teaching in this robot. And with our partnership, we put data in the cloud, and what a robot picks in, let's say, USA, can now teach a robot across the globe how to pick the article in the most efficient manner. Yeah. And what a remarkable idea! No private information is shared. It's just purely, here's this article. Here's what it looks like, and then the AI is like, hey, how do I orientate the gripper? And the more times you go to pick this thing, the more effective the pick becomes. Yeah. And so you have the use case I see for it, and it's not just on centralized warehousing, but also in microfulfillment. Imagine if you could send everyone home and have this robot kind of build up orders and stage them ahead of time for the ambient grocery, and then in the morning when everyone comes in, you can top off and complete orders, and you're ahead of the curve for like the immediate pickup, right?
Right.
And I think that it's going to be the collaborative effort between the current team that's on site and this robot picking up the pieces and increasing productivity hours.
I love that. That was actually what you and I were talking before we started about just my trip to Israel recently. That was actually my biggest takeaway from my trip to Israel too, is how this works. Like, the more you do it, the more you learn. Yep. And so, one, you've got to go experiment with this stuff, and two, from a competitive standpoint, you have to realize, like, if someone's out there experimenting with any of these types of things that we've been talking about on the show or here today, like, you're actually kind of behind the ball a little bit, because the systems are learning. They're getting smarter, they're better, and the more they're deployed, the smarter they get, and so you're just further and further behind. But that's fun. That's like actually one of my favorite things to just get my mind going.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, it's the whole, everyone uses the AI. It gets thrown around too much, and it's one of those things I was telling you earlier about how much we invest in the software piece of the equation, and even now seeing the application for like the shuttle technology and the learning behind like slotting of articles and the predictive analytics behind that, and knowing how to maximize the absolute throughput of that system, and empowering people on the local level to make decisions that it's very often my experience that sometimes on the local level people are afraid to make decisions for fear of productivity degradation.
Right.
And having this AI that's behind us allows us to make informed decisions and create confidence in moving the business forward. So I think that's definitely the other thing that AI is touching for us right now as well.
Yeah, the visualization that the human brain allows being brought into processes and automation and things like that. Yeah, it's fascinating. Wow, cool. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, I'm pumped about this. This one's going to be a blast, but we're going to play now. How millennial are you? Are you ready for this, Bill?
Let's make it happen.
Okay. I'm dying to find out where this goes. All right.
Is this going to get me in trouble with my wife at all?
Hopefully.
Okay.
And definitely the people back in the office. But let's start out with an easy one. All right. So, which we always do. And again, for those listening who've maybe never heard this before, but this is the game we play. And it's, again, not to understand how young you are, but really how curious of mind you are, because those are two very different things. So let's ask you this first. When the option is available, let's say you're pulling up to a grocery store. Are you pulling out a credit card, or are you using some type of mobile payment, like an Apple Pay, Samsung Pay?
I'd say in the last 12 months, I'm seeing 80% credit.
80% credit, really?
20% mobile. And here's what it is.
You're just talking about AI and computer vision.
Hear me out. Here's what
automation.
In Europe, in Europe when I travel over there, much easier, right? I have my Apple Wallet, and I just do my card in, and I can go and get a taxi cab, right?
Yeah.
I don't think in the U.S. market we do a good job of projecting saying, look, we can take mobile payment. I think, you have to look closely to
you're always
machine.
do you take Apple Pay? Yeah.
Yep. No, so we're programmed. I never understood why America lagged behind, in this particular regard, but yeah. So I'm seeing definitely an uptick with the apps and the wallet, so to speak. Okay. But yeah, I got a long way to go.
So you're prepping. You're getting ready.
Getting
there. Right. You're hedging.
Ask me next year where I am.
Yeah, right. We'll see where it goes. Yep. I'm curious about that for everybody, actually. All right. Question 2: how many times in the last, let's say, week, have you ordered food, beverage, coffee from a mobile app?
Ooh. I think on average twice a week now.
Twice a week, okay.
And it's usually
which establishment
to feed my my desire of consuming Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, right? Because you're out of Atlanta, right?
Right.
Okay, Chick-fil-A. Right. I actually just went on record this year and said Chick-fil-A has the best mobile app in the business. So do you agree with that?
I love the user experience. It's great. I mean, they were able to immediately get me to load my app with $25 and immediately getting a notification of a benefit I'm getting, like it was like a Chick-fil-A sandwich or something. And I'm thinking, like, you know what? I want to go to Chick-fil-A because I just want to scan my app now.
Right.
Like I find myself that, and and my kids love it. And,
are you ordering ahead too? Like,
I have before, at the mall. I have.
You have,
yes,
okay.
Which I think is extremely great, especially on Saturday.
Yeah.
In downtown Atlanta, it gets a little bit hectic at the Chick-fil-A stand, right, like every other mall. But But anyhow, yes, I'm a big fan of it. I think my wife likes the Starbucks one, but I haven't really jumped on that bandwagon.
You brought up something too. I've never thought about it. But like, what is the actual amount people generally preload onto their cards? So that's funny that you said 25. I'm a $25 guy too, whether it's Starbucks or whatever. If I'm going to do it, like that's why.
Right.
I'm curious what people do. I've never asked people that, but yeah, I think that thing's great. The loyalty points are pretty. The way the loyalty program works too is pretty awesome. All right, if you could only get you out of here on this. If you could only use one, I don't know where this is going to go with you. If you could only use one social app, what would it be and why?
So I use two, but I'm trying to think here. Like, in the morning, what is my routine and what do I check first? I honestly just think because I use LinkedIn so frequently and I'm connected, communicating on like globally on
for sure
grocery concepts. I find myself going to LinkedIn.
Is that the first one when you wake up?
But I'm immediately like trilling with Facebook. I am. I got my stepdaughter. She loves TikTok and stuff, and I'm hearing that TikTok's the next thing, right? Yep. And I just can't get behind of me singing and dancing on TikTok. So
no, the world doesn't need that. No, the world doesn't need that. Yeah, but you've got young kids too, like Facebook. So like Facebook for you. Yeah, those are my two big ones. Like from a routine perspective,
especially having family scattered across the country. Like it's the best way for us to share kind of what's going on in our life, right?
Yeah, especially.
I really hate when people on the business like LinkedIn sharing like personal content and opinions about politics. That's the one thing that just eats away at me, though.
That actually needs to stop. Yeah, I think that's actually, we've talked about that a few times on the program where that seems like that part's getting a little bit worse. But yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, you and I, because for those listening, we recorded this today at like 7:15 is when we started, and I think you and I were on LinkedIn talking to each other about 5:30 this morning or whatever it was on email or LinkedIn.
That's the beautiful thing about working for a European company. They're 6 hours ahead, so the emails are already starting to roll in.
You're up. In an engineering company, too. You're up and you're on time, so that's fantastic. All right, man. Well, hey, I thought this was a really, really fun and interesting discussion. Tried to unpack as many layers to it as we possibly could because I think there are a lot of angles to think about this, and there's just so much activity in this space. If people want to learn more about Knapp, they want to get in touch with you, we always ask, like, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, so you can always do research and connect with me through Knapp.com, Knapp.com, or you can send me an email at William.Stenger, Stenger, at Knapp.com. And if you're going to be down in Atlanta in March for Modex, we're going to be there. I'll be there for the first few days of the show, so love to talk to you if you got any questions and want to pick my brain.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, it's been awesome. And for those listening, too, we actually have a video of this, too, because you're in studio. You're here in Minneapolis, so we're doing this live, and it's been an absolute blast. Thanks for sitting down with us. Again, it's Bill Stenger, Director of Food Solutions for Knapp. For everyone out there, to all our loyal listeners, as always, be careful out there.